Universal background checks is a term that's been thrown out a lot lately, especially by the Biden administration. And I just want to explain what that actually means in simple terms. Right now, not every state requires that a private party sell go through a licensed dealer. So those private party transfers aren't necessarily subject to a background check. Now, that said, anybody selling a gun privately has the option, as long as the buyer is willing, to go into a dealer and have the dealer run a background check for them. The dealers will charge a fee for that, but if you're worried about the person you're selling to being a criminal, that's the way to keep it out of a criminal's hands. A lot of people don't like that though. They want the quick, easy cash, no questions asked, and move on. What a universal background check system would mean is that it would become illegal at the federal level for a private individual to sell their gun to another private individual. And that's where the pushback's coming from. These are guns that are already in the market, they're already out there, and up until now, there's no requirement that a background check be conducted on a private party sale at a federal level. Some states do require that private sales go through a dealer already. Does that always happen? Well, technically there's no gun registration, so yeah, do they really have a way to enforce it? Now, some states do have registrations, and that's a whole different world. But the background check system in and of itself, I'm not going to say it's flawless because it definitely isn't, but it works and it helps keep from infringing upon our rights to buy guns. Now, again, some states do infringe. You know, California has a mandatory 10-day waiting period. And then other states also have waiting periods that are mandatory. So regardless of what the background says, even if it says your background's clear immediately, you can't go home with the gun. You gotta wait. And I don't understand that logic, especially if somebody already owns a firearm. But that aside, universal background checks are not necessarily a bad thing, but they are an infringement. So instead of trying to force everybody to go through a dealer, and then also it's going to become cost prohibitive for somebody to sell their gun to an individual, because a dealer is going to want to make anywhere from $20 to $50 every time they run someone's background check. Because when we run those background checks, we have to keep that paperwork forever. Yeah, forever. So it's not just a in and out, easy done deal as a dealer, because we then have to log that in, log that out, file that paperwork. If that gun ends up somehow traced back to us, then we got to pull that paperwork back out, send it on. Now, the likelihood of it getting traced back to us is very slim because, again, there's no registration. So if a private individual comes to me to sell a gun, the only record of that is in my paperwork. So it's really going to be difficult for enforcement of that when it comes to private sales, especially kind of on the black market, you know, of everybody knows somebody kind of a thing. It would put more of an end to it at gun shows where people can't just go get a table and sell off guns if they're not licensed. But the cons outweigh the pros on this one. And I think that just reiterating responsible gun ownership and then reinforcing that if somebody's sketchy, you shouldn't sell your gun to them. And I say that because I see it all the time. So we do gun shows, and if you look at the yes and no questions on the 4473, there's some really stupid questions, but they serve a purpose. I have had people answer yes to the have you been convicted to a felony. You might ask, why would anybody ever actually say yes to that? Well, these people are trying to be honest, and to their knowledge, they can legally buy again. Texas has a thing called deferred adjudication, where if you do everything you're supposed to do in the time frame in which you're supposed to do it, you get your rights back. And these people were convicted and got their rights back. And they didn't read the instructions that go along with the form. Um, dishonorably discharged from the military can never buy a gun. What? That's crazy, but that's true. There's all kinds of little restrictions that aren't necessarily enforced or even shared at the private level. So I think that if we educated private citizens looking to sell their guns a little more on the restrictions, because a lot of people think it's just carte blanche, can do whatever I want, whenever I want, because it's a private sale. And that's not the case. Here in Texas, there's Texas state statutes that actually restrict who you can sell a gun to privately. And it pretty much mimics the dealer requirements. If you have any reason to believe that they can't buy a gun, you can't sell them a gun. If you have any reason to believe that they're not 21, you can't sell them a pistol. If you have any reason to believe that they're not a Texas resident, you can't sell them a pistol. And all kinds of stuff like that. The rules are still there. Just people choose to ignore them because, it's private, there's no record. Well, if people would self-police a little more, the government wouldn't need or feel the need to step in and police us. Now, a lot of this always comes up in light of a school shooting or some kind of a really tragic event that should never happen. And in those cases, I see the push for it. I'm going to reference the Uvalde shooting. Everybody questions, how does an 18-year-old have the money for those guns? I don't question that. When I was 18, I had $10,000 in the bank, and I didn't even blink. And that was all from me working and saving up over the years. If you don't have any bills or any expenses, it does not take long to save up money if you're not wasting it. He apparently had a history that wasn't on his record with regard to mental illness and some other stuff. And to me, the bigger issue over a universal background check is not sweeping stuff under the rug as kids grow, as kids age, even as adults. When somebody is allowed to plea down a charge, well, that plea could put them into where they can buy a gun instead of where they can't. And perhaps that's where we need to really look a little more, is at our judicial system that exists and the current systems and where they're failing in letting people get their hands on firearms. Another factor is parents and access to firearms that belong to the parents. You don't know everything going on in your kid's life. You don't. I don't care how well you think you know your child. I don't care how good your relationship is with your child. I guarantee you they're keeping something from you. And it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. But you don't know it all. And because you don't know everything, you need to make sure to take caution and protect them from everything. And that includes lapses in judgment. When somebody has a lapse in judgment, if they have access, that can cause issues. And that's where a lot of this has come from. These kids get firearms that are not properly secured and kept out of reach from these children. Or the kids know where the key's at. The kids know the safe code. And that's where we can do better as a society, I think. Keeping them out of the hands of kids when the kids aren't the ones buying it. And then holding more people accountable and sweeping less stuff under the rug as we grow and age. So, universal background checks aren't bad, but they are an infringement, so I don't support them. I don't think that a private individual should have to take their gun through a dealer to sell it if they don't have any reason to suspect the buyer is shady. That said, I do think that private sellers at gun shows should have more strict requirements on participating at those events, because if somebody's getting a table at a show week after week and they're not licensed, that's a problem. That's a problem for our industry, and that's a problem for our society, because those individuals aren't running background checks, and they're selling as many or more guns than I do in a weekend. And it's kind of crazy. Somebody in the Fort Worth area got arrested at the beginning of June, and the seizure information just came out 2-3 weeks ago, and this private seller had over 100 guns seized by the ATF as part of getting arrested at a gun show. And this guy was doing gun shows for different promoters at different locations throughout the state. That's where the government can do better. That's where I think they need to do better. Instead of trying to force additional requirements on law-abiding citizen, crack down on the ones that aren't currently law-abiding before you start imposing new regs on us. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. If there's anything you want to know about or have questions about, please drop it in the comments, and I'll do my best to get you an answer. Thank you.